the Ad Podcast. And today I am super excited to be able to bring you Kristine deGuzman, who's the managing director of Revere. And Kristine has held leadership roles at Edelman, running huge accounts like Meta and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And she's a member of Chief. She's a member of a bunch of different nonprofits where she gives back. And we're going to really get into a bunch of great questions today about, I think she's particularly suited to talk about the topic of B2B influencers because she's been running enterprise social media accounts for a long time. And I'm excited to get into a little bit of her backstory to kind of see how that feeds into her management style as an agency leader. So Kristine, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I gave a little brief background, but any other major milestones you want to fill in the audience on of how you kind of climb the ladder up to your MD role at Revere?
I'm going to also correct you really quickly, Revere.
But excuse me, Revere. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
No worries. It was an interesting question because I feel like when I think back to the trajectory of my career, like climbing the corporate ladder was not high on my list of things to do. Like I graduated from college. I knew I wanted to be a writer and I thought about getting into like social media specifically. And so I've really built my entire career in the agency world. But when I graduated from college, I didn't even know what the difference was between agencies and in-house. Like I'd never worked at an agency beforehand. And so when I think about like my career trajectory, it's just funny because I feel like I kind of came into it with such like a blank slate. But yeah, I had joined a company called Lewis Pulse at the time. It was the digital arm of Lewis PR. And we were a really small, scrappy team. We'd had some really interesting enterprise B2B tech clients like VMware, which I had worked on. And when I joined, we were a team of 5 people. And we just, we were a really scrappy team and we figured it out. And at the time, like this was before images were on Twitter. Like I feel like I'm dating myself a little bit here, but so it was interesting. Like we got to see so much of like how the channels evolved and whatnot. And so by the time I left, we had grown the team to about like 20 to 25 people. And I'd held so many different hats because of that experience and really being in this breeding ground for a smaller agency. Had experience with client relationship management and doing paid media and doing analytics and overseeing creatives and doing social media community management. And so it was a good experience just to get exposure to so many other parts of the business. And then when I left Lewis, I thought I was done with the agency world. I was done with tech. And that was just totally young, idealistic behavior. I had like an eat, pray, love 10 months and realized I don't know what to do other than work in social media and work in an agency. And just as I was literally in my last like $100 in my account or something, an old boss of mine from Lewis reached out and was like, hey, there's an opportunity at Edelman that I think you'd be perfect for leading the social and digital work that we're doing on Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And so that's how I came to be at Edelman. It was just kind of like good timing for where I was at the time. And Edelman's been a really supportive place for me. Like I've gotten to wear a lot of different hats there. I ran HPE for a few years. As you mentioned, I led Meta for the last couple of years. And I think what I really like about Edelman and what we tout a lot as a company is this entrepreneurial spirit that's very encouraged. And so I got pretty well known for at Edelman being an authentic, empathetic leader who knows how to build collaborative teams and knows how to build like, good community within the agency. And so it was those things that I think ultimately contributed to my reputation and getting tapped to lead Revere, because Revere is in a really interesting moment. We're going through brand transformation as we speak. It's something totally new and different that I've never experienced before. And I think, again, that also kind of just is indicative of what my career has been, is just kind of saying yes to opportunities as they've come in, even if I wasn't 100% confident in what it would look like. And I think social media is just one of those things. It evolves and it changes so much. And I think having the flexibility and the emotional resilience to kind of like go along with that has really suited me.
That's awesome. And then so Revere is another agency within the Edelman family, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So Revere is a tech sector specialty agency that is a separate operating company within Edelman, or within like the Daniel J. Edelman Holdings like network, but we specialize very specifically on scaling tech brands who are bringing innovative new things to market to ultimately create a better world.
That's cool. I love that. And is it kind of like startups or venture-backed startups? Is that kind of a focus, like on the innovation side? Or
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we work with a lot of venture-backed startups. Our main client actually that we work with is Google. So
yeah,
that's like a big part of like our, our business as well. But yeah, we tend to specialize in like high growth startups that, are looking to change the industry and change the world, which is really, kind of an exciting place to be.
yeah, I would say so. And you touched briefly on, kind of getting well known as a empathetic leader. I loved in your bio that your core values are leadership, authenticity, personal development, and not being an asshole. I think coming up in the agency world myself, I was a junior account executive at Bregman and Caffarelli right out of college. And at least when I came into the industry in Los Angeles, kind of with the intersection of the entertainment industry, wasn't always the most non-assholey culture and place to work. So, I'm just curious. It sounds like you've become very successful in taking that more empathetic approach. Why did that? How did that kind of unfold for you, and how has that worked for you in your career?
Yeah. And I think what is interesting about this is like, so I've spent several years kind of thinking about like, what are my values? Like, how do I want to portray myself to the world? Like, if I could pick four things to put like a stake in the ground, like what would it be? And these were the things that I landed on because I think that they are so core to my identity. Like I've been journaling and blogging for many, many years. And I think like authenticity and that sort and empathy comes very naturally to me as a result of that, because I've just been talking about myself in my journal for many decades. But I think to answer your question, in terms of how it shows up, it reminds me of when I first started at Edelman. Edelman, I had a boss who once told me that I was very nice, but that eventually, as the leader on this business, I was going to have to eventually be a little bit meaner and put my foot down in order to get these different disciplines to listen to me. And it was something that was really difficult to hear in the moment. And I was just super resistant to it. Like it just wasn't my style. I was like, this can't be the only way to like get things done. And so the other part of my personality that I'm really proud of is that I'm very focused on personal development. And every year I kind of have like a new big goal that I work towards. And so some years it lends to my job and like I pursue leadership things. It's why I'm a member of Chief and the Authentic Asian. I got certified to be an executive coach a few years ago. So there are things that I've done to really develop my skills as a leader, but then there are also things that I've pursued just because they're personally interesting to me. Like I got a yoga teaching certification, I pole dance, I, do a few other hobbies on the side. And I think the confidence that I've gained from these experiences have kind of made me a more well-rounded leader in terms of how I show up. And I have found that I thought that admitting to my peers, like, oh, I pole dance, like, like for fun. I thought that that would hold me back, or I thought that that would be judged. And I've actually found the opposite to be true at Edelman. And I found that by showing up in a very like transparent and vulnerable way, like vulnerability begets vulnerability. And I think I've been really surprised and really heartened that even like leaders that I've met, like executives at Edelman who have found out about the things that I do on the side, like it's actually gotten me like additional respect, or like
Oh,
people know what to expect from me. And so I think that that is a big part of how I lead now, is like I'm very upfront about who I am and like the things that make up my identity. And I really try to encourage others to, or invite others to kind of bring that aspects of themselves to work too. Because I just find that the work is better when there's a little bit of that like shared vulnerability. Like I think there's more of a willingness to give a little when you're getting a little from someone else. And yeah, so that's a big part of my leadership ethos.
I love it. And I think it makes you interesting, right? Like your backstory and the things that you do for fun, especially if it's not, something that everybody does. That's interesting. That's who you are, and that's part of your story.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I would argue, I feel like I was talking to a few friends last night, for example, and having a conversation with them around like, if money was no object, like, what would you do? Like, what would you do with your time? Like, what would you do with your life? And the stories and like the things that they shared were just totally out of left field. And so I feel like things that I would never expected, but that are really beautiful and like really cool dreams. And I think that we get so focused on the work sometimes that we lose sight of like the things that give us energy or that help us feel like magic in the world. And so it's nice to be able to give that space to others, because I think when you can give that opportunity to others, there's more opportunity for them to feel more purpose in their work. If that makes
No, I
sense.
love that. And I wanted to touch on the yoga piece real quick because I know from your blog that you are a James Clear fan of
Yeah.
Atomic Habits. You've been studying habit stacking, which is something that I've been studying this year as well. And I was just curious how your yoga practice or your exercise practice kind of, how do you position that in your day to make sure you have like your best possible day as you show up for work, or even, you know, on the weekends when maybe you're not working? And then I'd also love to hear how that helps you in your creative process as a creative exec.
Totally. And so I've actually gotten really into, again, like I read Atomic Habits a few years ago. And since then, I'm like, how do I create more systems to help me stay on track with my habits? And so I've gotten really into physical planners
Mm,
this year. So this year I'm using the Simple Self Planner, I think is what it is. And so every Sunday I like map out in my planner, like these are my meals for the week. These are the workouts that I have for the week. And then I'll, do silly things like James Clear talks about in his book. Like I'll put my yoga mat by the door, or I'll pull out my yoga clothes in advance so that I already know, like,
create that least amount of resistance, right? Is what he says.
exactly, exactly. So because I have it in my calendar, in my planner, and because I have the clothes set aside, like I make it, or sometimes I'll even like pre-register for a class to really hold myself
Mhm.
accountable to
Yep.
keeping that in my schedule. Um, so I do a lot of that to like stay on track of like my routines and exercise that I want to do. But I think it's gotten easier for me over the years as well, because I just find that I think better afterwards. Like I think when you are working in a creative leadership role, to really be successful, you need a lot of time to think. Like it's not just about like creating deliverables and sending things over. Like you really need a lot of like open space to just like think and problem solve. And I find that when I'm really stuck in a spiral or like a really difficult problem, um, if I'm not feeling like going to yoga because I'm like, I really need to solve this problem, I'll like force myself to go and then find afterwards, like, I feel so much less stressed. I feel like things will open up, like even on my drive to yoga, like just because of I know I'm about to be like in a place of relaxation. And so I find that I am better at my job because I make space for these things. And so even when things get really crazy, I try to continue to make space for them because I know that I'm ultimately going to be better for it afterwards.
Yeah, I love that. You know, when I right before I do a podcast, if I have low energy at all, I usually will go on a run like right before the show.
Mhm.
It's funny because I'll like show up in workout clothes almost and like sweat in my hair. But at the end of the day, like that energy and endorphin kick that I get from like going on a run, and I'll usually like think of like 2 or 3 interesting additional questions to ask like while I'm on the run. So yeah, I love that idea of like, you know, really like positioning your workout in a time of day where it actually like helps you, you know, like if it's a midday thing or if you're a morning workout person or if you need it at night, it helps you go to sleep, like making it strategic.
Totally. And I really admire the fact that you're able to work out in the middle of the day, because for whatever reason, like in the mornings and the afternoons, like I have not been able to get that out of get that out of me. But there is something that I love about a yoga class at the end of the day when I'm really stressed, especially if it's like a hard yoga class, like if
Mhm.
we're doing like handstands or arm balances or something, and it's just like really challenging.
Like
Getting
heated.
through, yeah, yeah, exactly. And like getting to the end of class, I just feel like, ah, I'm unstoppable. Like I already did something hard. I can do something hard from
Yeah.
here.
And that makes sense to make it an evening routine since it's such a physically exerting practice for exercise, but also it has that kind of winding down and like chilling out aspect. So I love that.
Totally. Yeah.
So another quote that you had mentioned in your bio is that you prioritize empathy over productivity. So I'd love to hear, how you do that. And then my guess is probably one leads to the other.
It 100% does. I feel like when I was earlier in my career as a manager, if someone didn't complete a deliverable on time or at the, or didn't deliver it at like the, quality that I expected, I feel like I would go into it as more of a hard ass. And, I was totally that kind of manager who, in seeing like an email before it got sent to the client, like mark it up in red. And that doesn't like, I've since learned like that doesn't make people want to do their best work. Like it makes them feel anxious, like they know they're going to get critiques. Like it creates like this spiral of just kind of like negative energy. And it doesn't get people to do their best work. And so I found that when I assume good intent, if I go to someone to say, hey, I was, expecting this, but are you still working on something else? Let me know if you have something else on your plate. Like, do you have any questions? When I go at it from a more gentle place, I find that I'm able to like uncover either issues or like challenges or blockers that I just wasn't aware of before that needed to be resolved, or I'm able to like kind of get this person to, yeah, just kind of like reveal something that I wouldn't have otherwise known. And so oftentimes what I have found is that when going at it from this gentle place, like junior employees will share like, I just didn't understand like the expectations, or I didn't understand the deliverables, which are very like easy things to solve for. And then the work gets better from there, like just taking that time to check in and seeing and doing that kind of coaching versus immediately assuming this person is underperforming, this person doesn't care, this person is checked out. And so I've seen a lot of like really positive turnaround stories in people's performance as a result of that. And so that's like one very tangible way that I go at like addressing feedback in like or addressing things from a very empathetic place. And then I find that like over time and doing like these kind of like small, like gentle conversations, it builds overall like a sense of psychological safety in the team where there is freedom to make mistakes. There's freedom to be transparent. There's freedom to say, I don't know what I'm doing, or, to be more vulnerable and transparent. And it's just so much easier to problem solve when people are coming at it from that place versus like when people feel like, oh, I haven't been given clear expectations or a clear role. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then they're afraid to ask for help because they're afraid of how that will look for them. And so, yeah, I just find that like teams function better when the expectations are clear, when there is freedom to make mistakes, where there's shared vulnerability on both sides. And yeah, I've seen some really cool things come as a result of that.
Yeah, I love that. And it seems like the fear-based approach, which might have been popular at one time, it kind of creates a vicious cycle, right? Because then people get tense up, they get defensive, then they make more mistakes, and it just kind of, people just spiral, I think, when you approach it in that fear-based mentality.
Totally. And I've had, I think the other advantage that I've had is like exposure to incredible leaders at Edelman. I mean, I've seen like in myself that my performance is better when someone comes to me from a more like a positive place, or a place that allows me to like express myself freely without fear of retribution or like, obviously there needs to be a sense of like shared respect too. Like you can't have blanket, openness and transparency if it's going to like lead to like negativity. But I have found that when leaders, create that space for me, I perform better. And so it is my goal to create that kind of environment for others.
I love it. So you also touched on a couple of professional development organizations that you're a part of. I've interviewed many members for Chief. That's probably no surprise. It's such a powerhouse organization for female entrepreneurs and executives to support each other. So I'd love to, hear a little bit about that and why you think that's important. But yeah, I really was fascinated to learn about the Authentic Asian group that you're a part of as well, because my first boss was Tony Chen from Channel Factory, 19 years old when I started working for him, first generation Chinese. I think it's interesting. We're in this interesting time in culture where like, Asian folks, like whether it's because like they, get into college so often, very like are in colleges like way at way higher numbers at certain campuses and stuff like that. I feel like almost like Asians as a minority is like not counting as much as it used to for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's I would be curious to understand, like, what do you guys do within that group and how do you guys support each other?
Yeah. I mean, the model minority myth, like kind of what you like basically alluded to, is such like a real thing. Just this idea that because Asians tend to be like a more highly educated demographic, that they don't experience the same kind of biases or, negative repercussions as other ethnicities. But I think with the Authentic Asia, Misa Chen, who's the founder, has just built a really cool community. And I'm really proud to be a member. It's very small, it's very intimate, and really the whole intent is to provide a space for Asian American female leaders to feel more connected and less alone, and provide opportunities for personal development and also support. And so she has hosted a lot of fireside chats with Asian American CEOs so that we can hear more directly from them around like how did they create like their paths in the corporate world. She's hosted like smaller coaching sessions or organized smaller coaching sessions based off of like where your career is or where exactly you want to get additional personal development. And I think it's just, the women that I've met in it are just so incredible. And I think are such good examples of, I mean, I think one of the things that I hear a lot about Asian Americans is particularly in like Edelman, for example, is that some of the junior employees that I've met will tell me that they've received feedback that they're not perceived as leaders because they're
Mm,
not as extroverted or not as loud. And so I think that there is this perception that Asian people tend to be more, reserved or quiet. And I think what has been so refreshing about meeting some of these women is that that's really just not true. Like
mm,
Asian leaders, we're not submissive, like we don't fit like the stereotypes that you see portrayed in the media. And I think, I'm Filipino American. My parents immigrated here from the Philippines. I rarely see other Filipino leaders like in the industry, and I'm personally used to being the only in rooms and have been so most of my career. And so it's really refreshing and empowering to be in community with other Asian female leaders who most of us have experienced a lot of the same things in the corporate world. And it's nice to have that sense of, you know, being able to share insights and learnings and not commiserate. That's not quite the word, but, kind of just sharing the experience with each other.
yeah, no, I love that. So I'm going to go into some things that I learned from reading your blog, which was super exciting. So, it's not always that I have guests that, are so vulnerable and bear their life story year after year, every New Year's. But it was really fascinating to read through a few of the most recent years. So my understanding is that you're fairly recently married. Is that
I
correct?
am. Yeah,
Yeah.
I am.
Congratulations.
Thank
And
you. We got married on New Year's Eve and just celebrated our 1 year.
let's go. Let's go. Well, I noticed on the blog that you were talking a little bit about kind of family planning and, when are you going to have kids? How many kids are you going to have? Um, do you feel like the current agency culture supports women who want to start families?
So first of all, I'm also just going to acknowledge the fact that you read my blog. Like, thank you. And also so funny. Like, just never, I don't know. I've been putting things out there for so long. I never really expect to read it, people to read it. And so when you shared that, I was like, that's hilarious. Just wanted to quickly acknowledge that and thank you.
Loved it.
Um, but yeah, in terms of like family planning in the agency world, like I've really only worked in two agencies. So, and I don't want to, um, I can't really make too many assumptions about the agency world writ large, but I can say with Edelman, we the amount of support that I have seen with like working parents at the agency has been really impressive. Like I think that I've had a lot of peers who have had kids who have been able to transition to more flexible working hours. We have agency wide what we call like house rules, and in it kind of talks about like someone's working hours might not be your working hours, but that doesn't mean that you have to like cater to their hours. Like, we have parents that are in the organization that, might be able to might have to do their work like after the kids go down to bed. Like, so just being very open about like the different experiences that you can have in the agency, whether you are a parent or not, I think is something that I've been glad to see the agency talk very openly about. Um, yeah, and so I know a lot of like, people at Edelman who I think have still been able to maintain their careers, maintain their growth while also still like supporting their families. So I think Edelman has been a good example for that. And if I start to have kids like next year or whatnot, like I'll definitely want to stick around with Edelman for that. But I know that, agency wide, there is conversation around like, are the benefits good enough though? Like, at tech companies, you'll see companies that, will pay for, egg freezing and in vitro and all of these things. And we have some of those benefits, not all. And I think that if we want to keep more women in the workforce, like more companies do need to start seriously considering offering those things because it is a show of good faith of, giving a shit about like, women or people with uteruses who want to have families.
Yeah, totally. And I'm blessed to work for a female CEO. Uh,
Mm.
that small percentage of I was astounded to actually read the other day an Ad Age statistic that only 1% of agencies are actually owned by women.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty shocking. But yeah, since working for her, I started working for her 8 years ago, and she's had 3 beautiful children, and even as the CEO, has been able to take 6-month maternity leaves every single time. So
That's incredible. I'm so glad that you shared that with me because the role that I'm in today is the most senior role that I've ever held, and I don't have kids yet. My husband and I are talking about trying, and it's something that does like sit in the back of my mind of like, have I been able to climb the corporate ladder as high as I have because I don't have kids and like because I'm able to focus so much on my work. And it's good to hear examples of like other women in high leadership positions who have still been able to take off that time and do both. Like there shouldn't be a reason why you can't do both.
yeah, totally. I think the whole lean in, culture of having everything is like, it maybe puts a little bit of an unrealistic expectation on what it's maybe going to be like, but
Mhm.
it's a doable situation. And there's never a perfect time. I feel like, my wife was an Omnicom exec before we started having kids, and she worked in house for Warner Brothers for a while as well. And she took 10 years off to have our children, and now she's back in, as an independent consultant and kind of getting her feet wet again. But it's I think COVID really changed things a lot too, right? With like the flexibility of working from home, it's really, I feel like, opened up such a better working environment with maybe less travel and more flexible office hours and work from home that really gives working moms a much better shot and allows them to be super competitive and effective because they can work on their own, terms, I think is the best way to put it.
100%. And I want to build on something that you shared about the pandemic. Like, I think one thing that I hope we don't lose from that experience is just like going back to this idea of empathy. Like, I feel like there was just so much empathy that we were all able to like have a shared experience around as like a species because we were able to have that look into people's lives. And so I feel like one of the behavior changes that I've noticed at Edelman is that I hear more like working moms like just speak very openly around like I have to do kid pickup or my kids are sick so I can't do XYZ, whereas I feel like they're like sometimes people wouldn't just wouldn't even mention it, like they would just be out of pocket, like there wouldn't be as much explanation. And I think because it seems like there's a lot more grace and open-mindedness about that, like I've found that people are a lot more open around like, no, I have to take care of my kids, and likewise people are more open to like accepting that that is a completely valid and fair reason.
Yeah, no, I love that. So another thing that I read in your blog is that you mentioned that you're currently packing and moving and hoping, I think, shortly to hopefully get into what you would consider a forever home. So what does
Yeah.
your forever home look like in your mind?
Well, I can actually tell you what it looks like really because we just closed
Wow,
on
let's go.
Friday. Yeah.
Go. Boom. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, I wrote in my New Year's survey like, yeah, I want to get a house this year, and then we got an offer accepted like 6 weeks later, which we weren't really expecting.
Yeah.
Um, but forever home for us, like, my family is all based in Southern California. And so I wanted to end up there. Like I might give my parents their only grandkid. So
Mhm.
that's something that was really important to me, to end up in Southern California. And um, sorry, I thought I heard an echo for a second. I think it's gone now. My husband, he grew up in Marin County in the Bay Area. And so he's used to walking outside and hiking in the morning, like just getting a casual hour-long hike before starting the day. And so that was something that was really important to him. And so where we have landed is in Altadena,
Oh, nice.
which I'm not sure. Okay, great. Yeah.
I lived
Which is,
I lived in Toluca Lake for 6 years before I moved to San Diego.
oh, nice. Yeah, not too far. And I think for those that don't know, like Altadena is just north of Pasadena. It's at the foothill of the San Gabriel Mountains. And so we closed escrow this past Friday, and my husband was down there, just kind of like getting things set up, like moving things out of our storage unit. And he was saying that like the things that are great about the house, like you walk outside and you have like a mountain view, and it's just
Mm.
really quiet. You can hear like the birds chirping, and we've got a nice big yard where we want like our dogs. We have an Australian Shepherd and a Dachshund Pomeranian mix, so there's room for them to like run around outside. And so like I think, yeah, the proximity to nature and like the peacefulness, while also proximity to LA, was really important. And I mean, totally honest, like proximity to Asian food. Like I am really, really excited to be close to Asian food after not really having that for the
Central
last few.
Valley is pretty much the mecca, right?
100%, 100%. My husband, he's ethnically Scottish, and so
Nice.
he's gonna get so many crash courses on Asian culture and identity and food when we're down there.
So fun. And I also read that you are a avid vintage designer, vintage shopper as well. So what's the best thing you've ever found vintage consigning or vintage thrifting like in the designer space?
Ooh, so I just got into this past like 6 months because my sister is a huge thrifter, way more than I could ever be. But I went to, I think it was in Costa Mesa, a thrift store, and I managed to find like a YSL, like Saint Laurent, like heavy knitted sweater that was in perfect condition, and it like retails for like $1,000. I got it for like $150 or something like
Okay.
that. And I was looking it up, and I can see why it was in perfect condition. It's technically a men's sweater, and it is like an extra large size, but I am 4'11" and it fits me. So I can
Wow.
imagine there was someone who bought it and like, very like reasonably inferring that it would fit a man. And I just, wearing it, I'm like, there is no way that this fits a man. Like it would be so tight on them. So that's probably my best find.
I love it. Yeah, I don't partake as much myself, but I'm the beneficiary of my wife's, and she recently got me two pairs of Prada loafers, brown ones and black ones, for 60
Ooh.
bucks. So that was pretty sick.
I was never, that's amazing, first of all. What a find. And I think the other thing that I've kind of realized is like I was never really like a designer person before. Like I understand designer is like high quality, it lasts forever, but like the price tags are so enormous. But like the idea of thrifting designer things is so much more appealing to me because it's like one, it's more sustainable, two, you're not paying full price. And for me, it's just really cool to, especially if you're getting things that are out of season or that are like several like generations old. And it's kind of cool to know that you have this like very unique, one of a kind piece. And I quit fast fashion like many, many years ago, not to be all high and mighty, mostly because it just didn't fit me very well. Like I have like a pretty small frame. And so yeah, thrifting has been a kind of a fun new experience or a fun new activity to do with my sister.
I love it. Yeah, obviously the trick is like find the ones in rich neighborhoods that are managed by little old ladies that bring in all their own stuff. Like that goes directly from the person into the store, and then it raises money for like some good cause. Those are the best ones.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, So I also noticed from your blog that you plan self-care weeks. Tell me a little bit about that, and how important is that to you, and what does that do for you, to reset and rest and recuperate?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I've had self-care weeks the last 2 years, and they were incredible. And I think where they kind of were born from was, well, first of all, during the pandemic, I like no one traveled. Like I didn't travel, no one traveled. And a couple, and so after that, I'd gotten kind of like an itch to travel more. And then one year I decided like I just wanted to take a solo vacation, just somewhere
Mm-hmm.
that was like very like beautifully designed and remote. And so I ended up going to this really beautiful hotel in Puerto Escondido called Hotel Terrestre. And it was so beautiful and quiet and relaxing. I got eaten alive by like bugs, but besides that, like it was just such a healing experience. And when I did the trip, I was completely off social media and off the news. And what I realized was like the feeling of boredom. Like I hadn't felt bored in a long time. Like I think I read 4 books on that trip, and I
Wow.
came back excited to come back to work. And I just hadn't felt that in years. Like this idea of like being bored and ready to come back to work. And so I think that that's something that I've now tried to like build into my life, like from that experience. And so last year, my self care week, I decided to just do a staycation because I didn't feel like traveling. And I did one night in like a nice Malibu hotel that I would never stay at normally. That was just kind of like beautifully designed. And then I got my hair color dyed, and then I got a massage, and then I had a spa day. And I just had like these little treats for myself sprinkled throughout the week. And then again, like was off social media, I was off the news. And even though I was in LA, like I felt like very disconnected. And I just felt so peaceful. And again, like by the end of the week, I was like ready to come back to work. And so I think that having one, I think the thing that I learned from both of these experiences is that one, it's so important to have something to look forward to, like especially when you're grinding every day and whatnot. Like it can be really easy to fall in this trap of like, oh, I can't take time off. There's so much to do, or I can't be away because otherwise things are going to fall through the cracks and the clients are going to be unhappy and then, XYZ. But I feel like when you're wearing yourself that thin, like you're not doing your best work anyway because you're so stressed, like you're not leaving space for like creativity or whatnot. And so yeah, I think these self-care weeks are such nice ways for me to kind of spend some time alone and kind of like recalibrate myself and then come back to work feeling like refreshed and ready.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't ever done the digital detox one. Well, one time I did. I was working in influencer marketing pre-social media when most of our integrations were like with celebrity news sites.
Hmm.
So it was kind of like a 24-hour gig, like because you never knew when the news was going to break. I mean,
Yeah.
the PR space, it can be that way sometimes. So my wife literally made me leave my cell phone at home when we went on the vacation to Palm Springs, and like the first day was like, actually, I think I almost, I mean, I almost had a conniption like when I was getting packed and ready to leave. But same thing, like once I actually got there and all I had was like my clothes and books and no phone, it was pretty freeing by the first day. And one of the things that I've tried to carry from that experience is on Sundays, I'll not even touch my phone. I won't take it with me even in the car unless I need it for like a map. I'll just leave it in my office and like try and not touch it. So
I love that. And I tried to do that for a year and then just kind of like fell
yeah,
off the wagon. It's because it's hard. Like these phones have become appendages. Like and it's something that I think I've been thinking a lot more about. Like I'm a couple chapters into Arnold's book. I don't know if you've read it.
no,
It's interesting because like what he talks about in it is how he was able to achieve so much in his life because he had a vision. And the reason he had a vision was because he had nothing to do in his hometown of Austria. And so all he did was like imagine what the next part of his life was going to look like. And that was how he envisioned his bodybuilding career and how clearly he could picture it in his mind because he had no other distractions. And what he talks about is how he feels a little bit sad for this generation because we are so overstimulated and have so much information just kind of like throwing itself at us at all times that we lose opportunities to, dream or envision or whatnot. And I think, for me personally, I do these detoxes, but when I'm not on a detox, like I'm well aware that I have a phone addiction and like I have apps on my phone to like restrict my screen time, and I try to leave my phone in like another room, but I can feel myself like reaching for my phone almost all day throughout the day. And it's something that, I'm personally trying to break, but it's something that makes me a little nervous for younger
Yeah.
generations who also just have grown up with exposure to phones.
Yeah, totally. I have 8 and 10-year-old girls, and they're constantly trying to get their devices. And if we're not really diligent about it, they would be in front of them 24 hours a day. It just shows you how I mean, I want to. Well, yeah, I'll just say it. They're dangerous in the hands of
Yeah,
kids. In the hands of impressionable minds that don't have any understanding of how the algorithm affects the brain and the dopamine and all
yeah,
that stuff. It's we work in social media, so that's how we make our living. And there are tremendous tools. Like I just got back from a trip from the Dominican Republic.
hmm,
I went with one of my old clients from Adobe because we're both like cigar aficionados, and he's a bit of
nice.
a cigar influencer on Instagram. But he met some random guy in the Dominican Republic on Instagram. The guy invited him down to like check out their cigar factory. We went down there. We had such an amazing experience. Lived like locals for 3 days. Basically, this guy picked us up at the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning, and this was all from just some random chance encounter on Instagram. That would have never happened before social media.
I mean, I feel like what you have just described like perfectly encapsulates the um kind of like the conflict or like the duality of us of people like working in social media is like you can kind of recognize some of like the negative parts of social media in terms of like there are trolls or it can be really addicting or like just you can doom scroll like that side of social media. But on the flip side, there is also so much beauty in terms of like the kinds of connections or community that you can find on social media that you might not otherwise find. Like it makes me think about like LGBTQ kids in like areas that are not as open and how they're able to like find that community online. And so I still very much so am a believer in like the positive aspects in social media. But yeah, I think like, as marketers and also just like an ethical human in the world, I do often also think about like, how do we balance the good while also keeping the bad in check?
Yeah, I think like anything, it's everything is okay in moderation, right?
100%. 100%. Yeah.
So, how's your love of camping coming along?
Oh my God. It's I don't mind camping. Like
Nice.
I can do car camping every now and then. Like I had an amazing Death Valley like car camping trip a year or so ago that was incredible and I loved that. But other than that, like camping is tough for me. Like
Um,
I I grew up with parents who, immigrated here from the Philippines and they were like, why would you pay money? Why would you go sleep on the ground when we came here so that you could sleep on a bed? Like, so that's a little bit part of it. And also my husband, when him and his family took me on a backpacking trip for the first time, it was like an expert level. Well, not expert. It was too advanced for me. It was like a 3,000 foot elevation climb up to 8,000 feet. It was like a 5 mile hike in and carrying a pack, and I just was not equipped for it. So, anyways, I'm still working on it. Still working on the love of camping.
well,
Maybe if you have any tips on
yeah.
how to, yeah, I would love tips on camping.
So my pro tip is get an RV. So, my wife, I always fantasized of us like driving around in an RV when we retired, and my wife was like over my dead body. And we were those weirdos during COVID that actually bought an RV and like just like stayed out in the mountains and stayed in the woods. And we did 5 week trips twice, and we just bought a brand new RV 2023. We did a 3 week trip last year to Montana, and Wyoming and the Grand Tetons. And this summer we're planning our longest trip ever, which we're hoping will be an 8-week trip.
Uh-huh.
So it's basically like all the beautiful parts of camping being in the woods, but you have all of your stuff with you and you're sleeping in a nice bed and you've got heat. And it's pretty bomb. I don't know if your husband will go for that if he thinks that's not authentic, but it's definitely a lot easier and a lot more comfortable. So
I'm gonna run it by him as soon as we get off of this. We like because what you just described is actually like his dream road trip as well. Like he's been talking. He'd spent a couple years living in Bozeman, Montana.
oh yeah, it's beautiful up there. That was actually where we were headed because we have a client up there that is like Airbnb for sportsmen that want to do outdoor activities and like go out on private land to do like fly fishing or RVing or sport hunting and things like that. So they're domiciled in Bozeman. So we went up there for a week to do content with them and hang out. And what a cool city. Like that place is just
Yeah.
blowing.
I've heard that too. Like for better or worse, like there's a lot of activity out there now. But yeah, no, I mean that I would love to do. Like I've definitely come around to I think that's like the thing about camping. It's like the roughing it I don't necessarily love, but I think the appreciation, I have such an appreciation for like the awe that you experience in nature. And like I went to Yosemite for the first time
Mm.
I think last year or the year before, and it blew my mind. And it's like I love that aspect of it. It's the backpacking in that is tough. The figuring out meals is tough. So the RV, like I would 100% buy into. But I have a question. Do you and your wife, do you guys switch off driving?
No. One time she drove in, I believe it was Wyoming, and she was going about 40 miles an hour down the highway. I think I was trying to do a call while she was driving,
Hmm.
and we made it about maybe 10 minutes down the road, and then we stopped at an antique store. Then we made it another 10 minutes, and we stopped for lunch. I think we probably only traveled 100 miles that entire day. So when she drives, we don't go anywhere.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, that would also be my husband's role if we had an RV. Like he would be the driver and I would figure out logistics,
Yeah,
they would share
and
responsibilities.
it's a driver and navigator. It's a good partnership.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so we're gonna head back into the professional for a little bit, and then we'll wind it up. But I think you're super well suited to talk about the space that I'm in, which is the B2B influencer marketing world. We're really doubling down as an agency this year. We've had the pleasure, like you, of working on a lot of enterprise social accounts. Adobe, Zendesk, Veridesk just kind of fell in our lap. We were a traditional influencer agency, and then we landed all these interesting, what I would call more B2B2C brands, where
Yeah.
they were B2B, but they were still activating traditional influencers because those bigger influencers kind of fed into their content model. Adobe being the creative software that powers the creative community, or Zendesk needing to power the e-commerce stores of traditional creators, et cetera. But we really feel like LinkedIn is the influencer marketing platform of 2024. Like it feels like everybody's on LinkedIn talking about personal stuff now, treating it like a traditional social network. It's not like a place where you just share your resume and you post like articles. Like you kind of treat it like a real social network now. And there's all these creators now that are building large followings and monetizing them, not unlike they do on Instagram or YouTube or these other traditional social media platforms. So as somebody who has built their career on running social and enterprise brands, what are your thoughts about LinkedIn being an influencer marketing platform?
I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you on that too. Like, I think LinkedIn has had such an interesting evolution over the last few years, in that, yeah, it's become less of a place where you post links. Like I remember when I was doing brand social pages and you would just like post a press release like on the channel. And now I think stories are actually resonating a lot more on LinkedIn. Like I feel like there's still a lot of like a mix out there. Like you still see a lot of like salesy type things or things that are a little disingenuous. Like some of the thought leadership I think is very formulaic sometimes, like what I see there. But I do see more of like that push towards like authenticity. And I know that LinkedIn as a brand is really passionate about like how do we help empower people to find like the jobs that are purposeful to them or that like are important to them. And so I think that as LinkedIn as a brand continues to kind of like go into that space and double down on that and encourage that kind of um, conversation on the platform, I think it's an interesting place to like have more like thought leadership in like a real way. And I also think it's interesting because like to your point around all the content creators out there, like I feel like interesting is an interesting platform to like build your public speaking like reputation
Mhm.
or like your thought leadership reputation outside of the way that we've seen it traditionally, where it would be like a byline or like a contributed article. Like now there's a lot more power for people to get their thoughts out there in a professional setting like LinkedIn versus, you know, putting your professional thoughts on Instagram, which doesn't always like hit. Um, but I think, yeah, I do think interesting is at an interesting place. Like I don't think it's fully reached its potential. And I do think that there are certain aspects of the UI that still need work. Like I don't know if you experience this on LinkedIn, but the messaging function is
Oh yeah, it's weird. It sometimes
so
gets itchy, right?
it's awful. Like it's so slow. And if you're trying to like open multiple pages at a time, I think because of like the way the coding is set up on the platform, like you'll get like really bad lag and like load time. So I think until LinkedIn fixes some of its like desktop issues, and because if you're writing long form content, like you're going to do it on desktop, you're not really going to do it on mobile. So I think until it fixes some of those things, it's going to inhibit it from really reaching its true potential. But I think it's really interesting to see where LinkedIn goes.
Yeah. Well, I think your daily intentions would make a really good LinkedIn series.
I've thought about that, and I actually have been writing daily intentions for the last year and a half. Like I do morning pages now every morning, and I also write out my intentions, and I've thought about it. Um, but it's like one of those things where I feel like I also still haven't even figured out my own personal brand on LinkedIn. Like I feel like I do write very vulnerably on LinkedIn, and I have shared my content on there. But I don't know. There's something about the idea of publishing every day on LinkedIn that feels like overkill for the
Yeah.
platform. But I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I'm getting in my own way.
Or, what I always say is, or I think like James Clear said in Atomic Habits, right? Like set yourself up for a goal that you know is achievable and manageable. If 5 sounds too daunting, start with 1. I originally started when I started this podcast, my intention was to do 1 a week, and now I do 1 every business day. So,
I don't
yeah,
think I realized that. Wow.
yeah. So,
That's
yeah, so
incredible.
it's cranking, but well, awesome. Well, I love that insight. So, all right, well, we're coming down to the final stretch here. So, Kristine, what are you most excited about the future in your new role as managing director of Revere?
I just think that I feel like I'm going to come at this from two different levels. Like I'm going to come at it on like a personal level and like on an industry level. I think at the industry level, there's so much innovation happening in the tech industry right now. Like, yes, there is also a lot of like contraction in the industry. There isn't as much investment happening. You're constantly seeing tech companies like laying off like their people in droves. And so I think that is definitely fostered, a little bit of like anxiety in tech, but the industry will eventually bounce back, like as it
Mhm.
does. And I think the things that we're seeing are really fascinating and like world changing. And so we work with some clients like in AI, for example, and humanoid robotics. Like we're seeing like that, one of our clients who works in the humanoid robotic space. It's fascinating to see like how much has grown there and encountering like the things that you saw in like that Will Smith movie, like back in the day,
Mhm.
or whatever those movies are, and just seeing that come to life and wanting and so yeah, I think like the growth of AI, the growth of like robotics, the growth of like, how transportation is evolving, how wellness technology is evolving, like how people are using technology to actually like improve their lives. Like I feel like there's just so much interesting like innovation happening in the tech industry that I think Revere is really well positioned to like work with those kinds of companies and be on the front lines of helping these companies tell their story, but also ground it in reality. Because I feel like there's a lot of fear mongering around AI, for example. And Edelman's trust barometer that just came out really recently talked about how business is responsible for really setting expectations around innovation and really bringing audiences along for the ride and kind of understanding like what is the impact to them, but also what is the benefit to them, because I feel like we just hear a lot about like the negative impacts of AI. So I think it's really interesting to be working with tech companies in this moment and helping them both tell their story but also help guide them around like how to make sure that we're actually building tech for like the good of society and the good of the species. So I
Yeah.
think that like on an industry level is interesting, and I would be interested to hear like your thoughts on that too, like working with like tech.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the fear component, right? I'm admittedly a Luddite. Like I generally am a late adopter to like using tech, but I,
Yes.
but I fully embrace it. Like I love how fast, the speed of innovation goes. I may not be the first one to jump on and like play with it, but,
Mhm.
working with Adobe for over 7 years, one of my favorite parts of working with them was attending Adobe Max every year.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, they had a really fun keynote address called Sneaks, which they would debut like new kind of like moonshot R&D that was coming down the pipeline in the product. And most of it was like AI style creative generation stuff before they were even maybe calling it AI, like content aware fill, where you could like circle a light post in a video and remove it like in a video. And inevitably like half the room would gasp because that's going to like take away their job. Like literally that's what I do for a living is take light posts out of videos, right? um,
Yeah.
but I think what I see the power of AI is, yes, this taking the light post out of the video goes from a 6 hour job that you got paid for 6 hours to 5 seconds, but that should free you up to do more interesting work. You shouldn't be fearful that that's going to like take away your job. I guess, as a business development person, I always say that an AI is never going to take you to a Laker game or a steak dinner. So
Hmm.
hopefully, the business development side will continue, because business is human. At the end of the day, you know, people at companies make decisions, and relationships are the byproduct of those decisions. So I
Yeah.
think there will always be that human element of it. But yeah, from Zendesk to Adobe, I'm excited about what the future holds in the tech space. And I agree, contraction can be scary, but sometimes in times of great chaos is the best time for great opportunity, right?
Totally. And it's actually the example that you just shared from like Adobe is it reminds me of a conversation that I had with some other leaders at Edelman earlier this week where we were talking about like what is the impact of AI going to be in terms of like jobs and like do people have like should people be afraid? And it was an interesting conversation in that like yes, it will eliminate some of these like admin tasks, but to your point, like it'll like get rid of some of or make some of these things more efficient so that you can focus on more of like the human aspects of the job, like relationship building or, you know, navigating political dynamics or whatnot. And what I liked about the conversation too is it brought up like as people get more efficient because of this technology, it will open up like new challenges and new complexities because of like the efficiencies that we'll gain from this. Like we'll be able to advance like more quickly, and as a result of the new complexities, it'll open up new industries that are meant to solve those complexities and those challenges, which will ultimately be like job creation, lead to job creation. So I thought
Yeah.
that was like an interesting, like, kind of angle to look at it too.
Yeah. Well, and look at every industrial revolution in history, whether it was the energy industrial revolution or the manufacturing industrial revolution, or now the AI industrial revolution, those technologies always, like, you telling me we're not going to ride around on horses anymore? Like, they always come with fear at the beginning, but they generally are on the precipice of massive growth and massive societal transformation. So I'm excited of what's ahead, especially, with just all the craziness that we've lived through over the last handful of years. I'm hoping that we're entering a time of elevated consciousness with some of this stuff.
I would hope so too. And just going back to the original question around like what I'm excited about from Revere, like on a personal level, and elevated consciousness, like I personally like use AI every day, like in my job. And I found that it's so like things that, maybe I should have gotten an MBA for, like what is the best way to like do market research? Like what is the best way to frame like a market opportunity slide? Like, or I'm about to meet a chief communications officer at this company. Like, what is a summary of like their 5 most recent articles and like pull out the insights that would be most relevant for a CEO. Like the way that it's been able to help me get more efficient and a very new role that I've never done before has been really transformative. And I think that it's freed up a lot of headspace for me so that I can focus on some of the other like parts of the job. And yeah, I think that's again like one of the things that I'm excited about Revere. It's a big challenge, it's a new challenge, but because we work with tech companies and because I'm a pretty like techie person, it's a fun challenge.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm sure you're going to be super successful. Thanks again for your courage to lead with vulnerability and to put yourself out there online. I think it made this interview way more interesting. It was a much more richer research process than I normally get to go through. So thank you for that. So anything else you want to plug before we sign off?
No, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, if any tech leaders of startup companies are interested in working with an agency that specializes in exactly this kind of thing, please do feel free to reach out to me. Or if you're someone that's passionate about empathetic and authentic leadership, like I could talk about that all day. So would love to connect with other like-minded folks.
I love it. Awesome. Well, for those of you who are following along at home, wherever you're listening or watching this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. And if you give us a review, that's how we expand to a wider audience. And most importantly, if there's someone within your network that you think would benefit for the conversation that I had with Kristine today, don't forget to share the show. So thanks so much, Kristine, for coming on.
Thank you again so much for having me, Dylan.